Hi, everyone. My name is Dave Frabel, and I am the manager of the National Fire Protection Program. I work in the Office of Facilities Management, Risk Management Division. Presenting today with me is Todd Rader, a Region 5 Fire Protection Engineer. Combined, we have over 60 plus years of experience with GSA and have been involved in fire protection engineering our entire careers. Welcome to the training. We have a lot of information to share with you, so let's get started. For this presentation, we will start out by providing an overview in Section 1 on some key fundamental topics that we feel impact the fire protection portion of most projects. And then in Section 2, we will discuss several significant updates that we have made in Chapter 7. As I stated in this section of the presentation, I'll be discussing some fundamental topics, more or less a refresher for everyone that I believe may affect most projects from a fire protection project perspective. So let's begin. The first key topic that I would like to remind everyone is that P100 is a mandatory standard. P100 is not a guideline, textbook, handbook, manual, nor a substitute for technical competence. P100 establishes design standards and criteria for new construction projects, repair and alteration projects, modernization projects, etc. It represents the current state of practice in designing facilities managed by GSA. P100 applies equally to all projects funded through BA 51, new construction, BA 54, minor repairs and alterations, BA 55, major repairs and alterations, as well as BA 64, BA 61, and BA 80 funding streams. The second topic I would like to discuss is the role and responsibility that has been assigned to the Regional Fire Protection Program Office. Please note that the Regional Fire Protection Office, aka the Regional Fire Protection Engineer, functions as the responsible party to make interpretations and enforcement decisions regarding fire protection issues whenever the terms building official, fire code official, or authority having jurisdiction is used in codes and standards adopted by GSA, depending on the application. This role has been assigned to the Regional Fire Protection Program Office by the Public Building Service Fire Protection Policy Document, PBS 5921.1, and is also referenced in Section 7.1.3.2 in Chapter 7. The third topic I would like to discuss is waivers. Please remember that waivers for fire protection requirements are not permitted. In lieu of waivers, the Regional Fire Protection Program Office will consider proposed alternatives that provide an equivalent compliance solution that meets the intent of the requirements in P100. Now, that being said, the fourth topic to discuss is alternative and equivalent compliance. This process is used in lieu of waivers for any deviation of the fire protection requirements in Chapter 7 in P100. Proposed alternatives must be evaluated by the Regional Fire Protection Program Office and deemed as an equivalent design solution in meeting the intent of the fire protection requirements in P100. All requests must also include a concurrent signature from the Regional Fire Protection Program Office and follow a similar approval process as the waiver process specified in P100. All proposed alternatives and equivalencies, including products, must be satisfactory and compliant with the intent of either the code or P100 and is at least equivalent to what the code or P100 prescribes in the terms of quality, strength, effectiveness, fire resistance, and safety. The fifth topic I would like to discuss concerns providing the local jurisdiction the opportunity to review our projects. Please remember that the regional project management team must provide the appropriate state and/or local government officials the opportunity to review the design of a project for building code compliance. From a fire protection perspective, this is important because a local jurisdiction may have some unique fire protection requirements that may need to be incorporated into a project design. For example, a local jurisdiction may have a specific type of fire pump or standpipe hose outlet connection and have specific requirements for those connections. Therefore, it is important that the regional project management team provides the local jurisdiction the opportunity to review the subject project. However, since local jurisdictions are not reimbursed for any fees for any of the actions taken by the local jurisdiction in connection with these reviews or any type of construction inspection, the local jurisdiction may not get involved in any GSA project and/or code interpretations. The sixth topic for discussion is the qualifications of the fire protection engineer on the project team staff. The regional project management team needs to ensure that the project team's fire protection engineer's qualification meets all the requirements outlined in Chapter 7. One of the key requirements is that we want a licensed engineer in fire protection. We do not want a licensed mechanical engineer designing our sprinkler systems, a licensed electrical engineer designing our fire alarm systems, or an architect performing egress calculations and a code analysis on fire protection requirements. No offense to any of the other engineering disciplines, but in the past, this issue has led to disagreements between the regional fire protection program office and the project team staff, and in some cases has caused project delays. In addition, please also remember that the project team's fire protection engineer must also be a full participant throughout the project, from the concept phase, design, construction, and occupancy. The last topic I would like to highlight is the certificate of occupancy. This is very important since this topic will affect every new construction project or major renovation project. This is because the subject building and/or space cannot be occupied until a certificate of occupancy is issued by the Regional Fire Protection Program Office to the Regional Project Management Team. The building certificate of occupancy ensures that all fire protection and life safety systems have been completed, inspected, successfully tested, and approved for the building to provide a reasonable degree of safety to the occupants from fire and similar emergencies. A temporary certificate of occupancy may be issued to the regional project management team when partial occupancy of a building can be achieved. For example, a new high-rise building may be permitted a partial occupancy of the building on the lower floors in which all fire protection systems, serving those areas proposed for occupancy, and all floors below have been completed, inspected, successfully tested, and approved by the regional fire protection engineer. Prior to the issuance of a final certificate of occupancy, all outstanding fire protection and life safety deficiencies identified by the GSA Regional Fire Protection Engineer during the inspection and acceptance processes of the projects must be corrected and verified. Now I'll stop there and we'll see if there's any questions on section 1. Okay, I have a hand raise. I guess we can take the question via voice. Yes, Margaret?
Okay, yes. So I've seen sometime in the code and in specs, it'll say authority having jurisdiction. In this case, will it be GSA or as a certified fire protection engineer? Who would be the authority having jurisdiction for fire protection?
Okay, regarding a federally owned building, the authority having jurisdiction, and that term's typically used in NFPA standards, would be the GSA Regional Fire Protection Engineer.
Okay, thank you. Would that also apply for lease?
No, in lease space, that would go to the local jurisdiction.
Local,
and
okay.
either be the building code official or fire code official for that jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Mr. Young, Barry?
No, you already answered the question. I was going to ask something similar to what Margaret asked. So you answered that question. So I don't have it anymore. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We'll now go on to section 2. I'll now pass the presentation over to Todd to discuss the significant updates that have been done in chapter 7. Go ahead, Todd.
Hey, Dave, you may have to move the slides for me. You're not sharing the presentation with me anymore.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Dave. As Dave alluded to in section 2, we're just going to cover the significant changes to the 2024 edition of P100, specifically chapter 7. Dave already briefly touched on the project team fire protection engineer. However, he covered that in fundamental 6, I believe. However, there's been a few additional responsibilities added to section 7131. These requirements were added based on DoD and VA requirements. So as part of the project team fire protection engineer, the added responsibilities include them to complete review of all submittals related to the fire protection system. So that means they are required to review calculations, shop drawings, anything that's related to the design work that they would be completed. They must also review RFIs, requests for information and change orders. Verify by inspection that all systems have been installed to met design requirements. This is somewhat critical from a quality control perspective because traditionally the design team fire protection engineer is also going to be the design of record. So this adds a extra layer of quality assurance that the work is actually installed based on those approved design parameters. The fourth additional responsibility that was added was that the design FPE is required to witness preliminary testing and confirm those results met the design parameters. One thing to make mention with this does not substitute any additional acceptance and or integrated testing that would be completed by the regional FPE on that project. In general, these additional responsibilities were added to reinforce the need that the project team FPE is an active participant through the entire life cycle of the project. The next significant change is associated with fire alarm and emergency communication systems. A new special requirement was added, or I should say a new requirement was revised to address plain old telephone lines going away. That traditional term that many of us have heard, POTS. In general, these telephone lines are used to transmit fire alarm signals from the building fire alarm system to the supervisory monitoring station that then calls the fire department on behalf of that specific property. In general, the telephone carriers are no longer maintaining these POTS lines due to high maintenance costs. So it's the primary driving force behind that. So for us to pivot and come up with an additional solution that works for the government in partnership with GSA IT to address this issue, we are now utilizing and allowing the use of the GSA network to be utilized to send those signals out. And that's completed through the use and approved method of a dual path fire alarm communicator. One side note associated with the dual path communicator, currently the only equipment that is approved through GSA IT is a Bosch 465. That's been through a series of multitude of tests. It's my understanding other forms of communication are currently in review. However, at this point in time, there's no other unit approved other than the Bosch B465. If Dave had anything else to add to that, I know he was kind of spearheading that project. Dave, do you have anything to add related to any other additional dual path communicators being approved?
No, that's the latest as of today. We're hoping at least 2 others get approved. I'm hoping by early next fiscal year, or this fiscal year, but probably January or February.
Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, in my area, I'm in the border area, so we have nothing but copper lines and nothing but issues with them. I have not heard about that new dual thing, but the only thing that we have a cell phone service. That's what we've been going to here lately. Are we still waiting compliance?
What? I didn't hear what you said, Al. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. I'm from the border, and we got several border stations, and for the most part, we have copper lines, right? But as you said earlier, we have a lot of issues with copper lines that are malfunction. In order to get something going, we have cell phone services now. We've been adding cell phone services.
And the cell phone service would have to go through a Bosch B465 communicator.
I see. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
So we'll take one more question, and then any additional questions that are either brought up currently with the hand feature or put in the Q&A, we can address at the end of section 2. So go ahead, Eduardo, with your question, and that'll be the last one.
Yes, it's tying to what Al just said, that even if we get cell phone lines here in the border, sometimes our signal crosses to Mexico and we lose that one too. When it switches to the Mexico carrier. That's the problem we have here in the border.
Right. GSA IT is looking into that. Not necessarily, they were looking at it on the northern border. I haven't heard from, they were going to look into it. That issue came up last week. I haven't touched base with them this week yet, but they're looking into that. The issue with that, and I'm not the carrier expert, but it deals on the monitoring service receivers, if they can accept a signal from the carriers. Is it the same, I guess, transmitter they have in a foreign country versus the United States. So,
Okay. Yeah, and if there's any additional follow-on questions, just put that into the Q&A session and we can address those at the end. Or in a situation like this, if there's any specific questions that you would have, I would suggest, and I believe Dave would suggest, to reach out to your local FPE within your region to address those questions.
correct. The regional fire protection engineers are up to date, and I usually inform them of any nuances that have occurred. Now, the regarding utilizing a foreign cell phone service, that just came up last week, and it deals with the receivers and transmitters within the supervising and monitoring stations in the U.S. I hope there won't be an issue with that from a security, GSA IT security issue. So.
Okay, Dave, you can move on to the next one, please.
Okay.
Next update, I wouldn't necessarily say this is significant, but nonetheless, it's an update related to manual fire alarm pull boxes within 761. Special requirement has been added to address unwanted fire alarm system activation, specifically in public areas on the first floor of a building. As you can see, this revision now requires a listed protective cover to be installed on the manual fire alarm pull box. That also has a built-in horn that sounds when the cover is listed to gain access without restricting legitimate operation. Again, this is minor in nature. However, it is critical from the perspective of minimizing false alarms, especially in those public areas.
All right.
Portable fire extinguishers located in section 795. The special requirement has been revised to include additional specific areas within a building that's required to have portable fire extinguishers. Those new areas are listed below. For example, electrical rooms, energy storage system rooms, kitchens, kitchenettes. These additional areas would be in addition to the areas that are already listed out in 795 related to the placement and location of the PFEs. Again, generally they're going to be placed in the higher risk areas. In addition, this section was revised to clarify that the overall intent of not requiring portable fire extinguishers in public and common areas, general office areas, courtrooms, judges' chambers, generally the support space of these buildings, to not have portable fire extinguishers installed. One critical thing to note that has been a pretty consistent requirement through P100 over the years is that this only applies in buildings that are protected throughout by quick response sprinklers. So this section was just clarified to add those additional areas and then also clarify the overall intent of the reasoning behind the placement and providing of the portable fire extinguishers. So elevator systems and special requirements 1 and 2 have been revised specifically to kind of stay along with current technology. Special requirement has now added MRL elevators. MRL elevators are machine roomless elevator systems where, unlike a traditional elevator, does not have a separate room for its machinery. Special requirement 2 under that same section was also revised to indicate that sprinklers at the bottom or top of the hoistways are not required unless required by the GSA Regional Fire Protection Engineer. That would be to deal with specific site-specific circumstances that would be not your norm. So part of the revising of those special requirements is to deal with the MRLs, and then to also leave some flexibility as far as from a risk and site specific perspective related to not providing sprinklers. Occupant evacuation elevators. This is the second cycle, I believe, Dave, that this section has been in place. There's a few GSA-owned facilities that actually have occupant evacuation elevators, correct, Dave? How many locations in the country do we have these? Do you know?
3 current locations, and this has been in since, I believe, 2010, 2012 edition of P100.
Okay. So this special requirement was added based on GSA's experience with current installations. The requirement, or I should say the new requirement, is now to add a monitor within the elevator control room to identify those occupant evacuation elevator functions for acceptance testing and general maintenance and testing procedures. So it's just an added tool to the toolbox to assist in those situations. Information technology equipment rooms. This has been slightly revised, more or less to clarify that information technology equipment, or ITE spaces, and their associated rooms must be designed in accordance with NFPA 75. I think the bigger two of the revisions is the fact that we now allow the project team FPE that we've talked about on a couple of the previous slides to utilize either a prescriptive based and or performance based approach to determine construction, fire suppression, detection, etc. for these spaces. In any case, the fire protection approach still must be based on the evaluation of the fire risks and the hazards associated with that ITE, the application, the services, continuity planning, and restoration capabilities of those spaces. So this section's been revised to allow some outside the box thinking, more risk-based scenario thinking, to be specific with the application in hand versus sticking to those typical prescriptive based requirements that we have in the past. We're getting into some of the newer technology, stationary energy storage systems. 71111 was revised with 2 new requirements for energy storage systems in non-dedicated buildings. The first special requirement is that the project team FPE is required to develop a hazard mitigation analysis demonstrating the safety of the energy storage system. What's important with this is that this is an analysis that must be approved by the GSA regional FPE on a case-by-case basis. And then 2, electrochemical energy storage systems now must utilize maintenance-free batteries. This was added based on another region finding that the typical top off the battery type of solution really wasn't effective within our portfolio. So this is to help minimize and reduce those risks with having to constantly be topping off wet cell batteries with an electrolyte solution. So the next couple slides are going to address new requirements that are now appearing for the first time. The 71112 deals specifically with parking structures. And again, to reiterate, these are new requirements. All parking structures must be protected throughout by an automatic sprinkler system. And what's critical with this is it includes open and enclosed parking structures. In the past, this generally only pertained to enclosed parking structures. However, that requirement has now been extended to open. A little background to the logic behind the reason why this was added. These requirements are based on recent NFPA, National Fire Protection Research Foundation research on the new hazards with modern vehicles. The design of the vehicles now have more plastics, more combustible materials, in addition to the alternate fuels being used, primarily electric, and the narrower parking spaces within the current designs of parking structures. Also, any parking structure is required to be provided with a Class 1 standpipe system, which is your traditional 2.5-inch outlet. During fire department operations, this would be the primary water supply source used by the fire department when managing vehicle fire incidents. I think I heard a question come up. Yes, go ahead. Question?
Yeah, Mr. Jumo?
Sorry about that. Didn't mean to raise my hand.
Okay.
No worries. Another new hazard per se, modular rooms. Section 71113, along with the special requirements, were added to deal with modular rooms, or otherwise known as smart and soundproof office pods. These are starting to appear in many of our facilities. As it relates to the special requirements associated with the modular rooms, sprinkler protection is now required when the modular rooms are greater than 24 square feet and installed in existing and when they're also installed in an existing sprinkler area within the building. Again, this affects modular spaces greater than 24 feet. If they're less than 24 feet, they are technically not required to have a sprinkler installed within them. So this is in those situations when the pod is greater than 24. The second special requirement is that the occupants within the modular room must be able to be alerted to fire or other emergencies. In this situation, we would highly suggest that you communicate directly with your regional FPE to determine whether or not additional protection is required within the modular space. The third special requirement is that obviously we don't want any of these modular rooms to be placed in the means of egress, or block a means of egress, or produce an obstruction that may result in you not being able to see emergency exit signage. I think probably one of the bigger things is that the minimum separation distance of 18 inches is required between these spaces, and that applies both in sprinklered and unsprinklered buildings.
I see we have a question. Michael?
Yes, thank you. Michael Fogel, GSA National Accessibility Officer. When you attach a sprinkler system to these modular rooms, are these rooms now considered fixed to the, as fixed to the floor, as fixed to the facility? Because that makes a difference in accessibility if these things are fixed or non-fixed elements. If they're non-fixed, then they do not require any type of ABAS accessibility. If they are fixed, then they are required to be accessible.
So I can speak to this at a high level. I sit here in Indianapolis, and we recently went through a relatively significant CBP backfill project where approximately 75 to 80 of these pods were actually installed. And I believe there was a significant number of them that were also ADA accessible. They're oriented in a little bit of a different fashion, and I believe that was specifically provided to meet those ABAS requirements. as far as whether it's fixed or unfixed, I can't necessarily speak to that, but I do know that several of the pod manufacturers do make accessible units to deal with that requirement.
So are these considered workstations or work surfaces of some kind? How are they defined? I mean, that as an element.
They're technically, from a code perspective, they're defined as a modular room.
A modular room.
Yes,
Okay.
modular room.
And so that's fixed furniture.
Well, the
I'm
ones
sorry.
that I've seen the ones that I've seen have not been fixed.
Right.
Okay.
And
So
I
I
know-
mean, you in theory could relocate one with ease if that was the intent behind it.
yeah, personally, I have not seen a fixed one either.
So putting a sprinkler system through the ceiling of this thing does not make it a fixed piece of furniture, fixed element.
I do not consider this furniture per se because it's occupied.
So it's a workstation.
It's a term, I'm not sure, but it's not furniture. Not sure if it's a workstation. I'm not sure. It's considered a modular room. But they are being installed throughout the portfolio.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And since we're on the topic of modular spaces and pods, this one's pretty straightforward. Sleep pods. Sleep pods are not permitted to be installed within GSA controlled space. The general premise behind that is if they are installed, it could result in a change of occupancy classification. And in addition to that, the fire protection requirements for the building or area due to occupants sleeping could potentially cause some rather significant issues. So at the current time, they are not approved. EVSE is a new section. I know the previous P100 training series had a specific training session on Chapter 8. And as referenced here in 7.11.15, this is just a correlation to reference the user of P100 back to Chapter 8 for the specific requirements for EVSEs. The intent of this presentation is just to make you aware of it, not to go into the specific details and or requirements of that section. And this one is rather minor in nature. This is just another correlation for carbon monoxide detection. It's a new section. The reference is made here that CO detection must be installed in accordance with the requirements within the IBC, IMC, and NFPA 72. Again, this is just a correlation to new design and installation standards. And that's it for section 2. If there's any additional questions for section 2 and or section 1, we have the time to address those. Ben, I have not looked in the Q&A feature to see if there's any other additional questions.
Yeah, I'm going through it right now. There was a question regarding, and I'll try to answer the first one. It basically says, do you have to issue a certificate of occupancy for a project that has no fire protection aspects to it? The answer is no, you would not. I'm not sure what type of new construction project or major modernization would not impact fire protection and its systems, but technically, no, you would not if there's no fire protection portion on that project. The next question is there an issue with the mega center accepting a cell phone signal? The answer is yes, I believe there is. I believe it's an IT issue and it's a receiver issue. situation. Right now, we're moving away from the mega center with regard to transmitting signals to those mega centers. First, they don't accept the Bosch B465 transmitter signals, and there's some other issues with regard to accepting cellular. What about VoIP? Is that an option for emergency alarm signal? The answer is no, it's not. VoIP is not an acceptable alternative. A lot of cell phone questions. Can you clarify the instances where only the cellular path is utilized or a Bosch device required to achieve a redundant path? My understanding is if Bosch cellular operates on a Verizon SIM, in the event the cell phone tower goes down, it will attempt to transmit signal via an AT&T or another carrier. That's incorrect. For the Bosch B465, you would have to purchase 2 communicators. One with a Verizon, I'll call it SIM card, and the second one would be configured for an AT&T. So if the Verizon goes down, the alternate path would be transferred to the secondary, if Verizon's a primary, secondary fire alarm communicator, which would utilize an AT&T SIM card. Next question. If you're not connecting to the GSA IT network and only using cellular, why are we requiring a Bosch 465 communicator? Because of the security features. The purpose of the Bosch is for security when it connects to the GSA network. That is incorrect. GSA IT also noted security vulnerabilities utilizing the cloud-based networks, and therefore it has to go through their security evaluation and meet their requirements. The Bosch B465 communicator is the only one that met those requirements at this time. Next question. Oh, this person's more intelligent than me. Given the solution of finally getting on the GSA network, do we know if it's on the ENT BSN BNs? If BSN, maybe the automation system can use it for trend analysis input. The fire peeps may answer after screaming at me. Yes, I've seen those terms, BSN, VMs, and BSN. I'm not the GSA IT network guy. I don't know what kind of trend analysis you're looking into or for. We get reports back on the number of transmissions being sent, either alarm signals or even unwanted fire alarm signals. Yes, Mr. Beatty.
Yeah, John Beadle, Region 5 Smart Buildings Program Manager. The reason I put that in there is BSN is Building Systems Network for the BAS. And yeah, fire peeps do not like any wording of putting the fire notifications on BAS. I don't know if they're going onto the IT network, which you have the enterprise network and then the Building Systems Network. They're both just virtual, so they can switch back and forth, or not switch back and forth, sorry. But anyway, yeah, that's what was my question, was whether or not we could get it for GSA Link to say, if there's a fire, these things happen within the GSA Link, so they don't have some type of rule.
We can meet offline on that.
Sure.
I can answer that question off the top of my head. And then again, I'm not the GSA network individual. I'm dealing with GSA IT network individuals who's providing direction on this. So
Sure thing.
yeah, we can meet offline on this.
Sure.
I'll move on to the next one. Is the GSA fire protection program aware that most central station monitoring stations do not have equipment designated to have the security encryption that GSA requires? Therefore, it creates an issue for them to receive signals from the Bosch B465 with GSA security encryption requirements. There may be some central monitoring stations that have issues, but I also know that there's central monitoring servers that have not had issues with the encryption requirements. I would love to hear more about this. Send me an email separately after the presentation, and I'll look into it, Mr. Anonymous. Or Mrs. Anonymous. Next one. Does the monitoring system affect accessibility requirements? No, it does not. This is offsite. It's where I assume you're talking about the fire alarm signals going to a supervisory monitoring station. That's the monitoring system. So the answer is
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We're running into issues with security and accessibility with this, especially with this offsite monitoring system. And part of the reason we do the offsite is for accessibility reasons.
yeah, we've never run, there's no accessibility issue with transmitting signals. What are examples of non-dedicated and dedicated buildings? This deals with ESSS. A dedicated building would be one designed specifically for the energy storage system. A non-dedicated building would be a federal-owned building, sticking energy storage systems either in a basement or within the building. That's the basic difference between the two types of buildings. Okay. What type of occupant load dictates the usage of an occupant evacuation elevator? What type of occupant load? It's based on building height. It's any new construction over 120 feet. That's where we require an occupant evacuation elevator. We do not base it on occupant load. The building code does not base it on occupant load either. They base it on height also. The next question is, and the last question, is there any additional fire suppression requirements associated with electric vehicle supply equipment or EV parking? At this time, the answer is no. The only requirement is that the parking structure be sprinklered and a standpipe system be installed. That's all the questions. Any additional questions? Okay, from both Todd and myself, I want to thank you for your questions and being attentive. And if you have think of any questions later, you can either reach out to Todd or myself, and we'll be happy to try to answer them. Have a great day.
Thank you, Dave and Todd. Great presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.